You're listening to Head to Head, a Star Wars podcast. Two fans, two generations, all things Star Wars begins now.
All right, well, hello, everybody. I'm Eric Vansel.
I'm Daryl Sanders.
And we're your hosts for this very late starting show. Fortunately, as you know, if you guys are watching live, and that's a big if you guys are watching live, Chad's here. Well, thank you, Chad, for, tuning in, considering you're one of the reasons why we're going on so late. You know what? I got to put this up here. I have to. Chad's here. Like the avatar. It's really cool. But yeah, you know what? We're starting late. Doesn't matter. We got some stuff to talk about. It looks like, and this is something that you had just introduced to me, I think, what was like a couple of days ago? By the way, Chad, hit that like button. I know you want to do it. And that goes for anybody else. Anybody else that's watching right now, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button if you haven't already done so. We're about to get into some really interesting news about Andor, which I was going to say, you had just brought this to my attention, I think yesterday, if I'm not mistaken.
What's that, Friday? I think it might have been Wednesday.
It might have been Wednesday. I know it was in the last few days, though, because I remember when you actually sent this to me, it didn't register right away. And then that's what it was. Yesterday, I started watching or reading the article about it, and I was just completely taken aback by this news that it's going from 5 seasons to only 2 seasons, which I think is crazy. But what did you think about it when you first saw that?
Yeah, when I first checked it out, I was kind of wondering, like, I instantly thought, like, okay, what problems are they having over at Disney now that they've gone from 5? I mean, because that's a massive cut.
Yes.
You
know what? I never thought about that, but that's so true. The first thing that you would think of is, oh man, Kathleen Kennedy or somebody's at it again, because once again, Disney probably made somebody upset, and now they, or maybe it was like a budget thing or something like that. But yeah, that was crazy. So that's a good point.
Yeah, man. So that was my first thought, was like, okay, and then I had to figure out why. Like, okay, and the answer surprisingly was not what I thought.
Exactly.
And it actually had a well thought out reason as to why, they're not doing 5 and they're going with 2 seasons. So
yeah, we can get into that a little bit. There's a couple of quotes that I want to, usually I would put this up on the screen, but I didn't really have time to get all that set up. But basically, Tony Gilroy, and this is another thing that surprised me too, is I forgot there was somebody else that was originally attached to this project, that it was not going to be him. Now, if you guys remember, Tony Gilroy was the one who was hired to come in and punch up a bunch of scenes for Rogue One. So Gareth Edwards was the actual director of that, and what had happened was, of course, Kathleen Kennedy wasn't happy. I don't remember if there was any, I don't think there was any test audiences or anything like that, but I just remember that there was a little bit of hesitation the way that it was presented. And so she hired Tony Gilroy to come in and basically direct a bunch of reshoots, even though the film is actually credited to Tony Gilroy. Or I'm sorry, Gareth Edwards. But similar situation. Now you get a guy who was originally attached to the Andor series that's coming on Disney Plus, I think September 23rd, right?
I believe it starts the 21st.
Maybe it is the 21st. I know it's around there, but the thing that's interesting about it is more and more stuff is coming out. And so it looks like Tony Gilroy was brought on. And, he remembers, he's quoted as saying, I remember Kathy saying, what can we do? And I said, well, what kind of stories do you want to do? And she goes, we could do anything. So I said, could you do like Inherit the Wind? Which, was this whole like legal drama kind of thing. And he basically started thinking about, the seasons and and just what they were going to do. And he goes, you just couldn't possibly physically make 5 years of the show. I mean, Diego would be like 65. I'd be in a nursing home. We were panicked. We can't sign on to this forever. And I just want to hang on that for a second, because I think that that's a really interesting point, because they're actually recognizing the fact that all these things have an expiration date. And that's one of the things that you see about the Marvel movies, and this is why I think they have to do this in phases or whatever, is because, you know, you can't have Robert Downey Jr. playing Iron Man into his 70s, you know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, you know, this is a huge thing, and these are things that people have to consider when you're thinking about, and I think this is something about moving or creating I'm gonna say a franchise character, but a character within the franchise. You kind of have to think about longevity. So before you introduce a character, and if you really think that they're gonna, you know, possibly have a spinoff, and that's one of the things too. Like, you know, are you building characters to do that? Are you creating characters that, you know what, we're introducing them in this movie, but eventually we're going to actually give them a spinoff. So to that point, you have to start thinking like, okay, if we do that, one, when will we begin the spinoffs? And then two, for how long? Because once again, like I said, everybody kind of has a shelf life as far as playing the character, and you never know what happens. You know, it could, you know, the actor or actress could say, you know what, I want to do other things. You know, it's like, okay, you know, almost like a Daniel Craig type thing. It's like, okay, you know, I've had my fill of playing James Bond. Like, I want to do other stuff. I don't want to be tied to playing James Bond for the rest of my life. You know what I mean? So, those are things that you know, people like Kathleen Kennedy, Filoni, all those folks have to kind of think about. Even somebody like Rosario Dawson, right? You know, she's getting Ahsoka. She's done great in The Mandalorian. She's probably going to be awesome, you know, in her own series. But realistically, how long is she going to play that character? And if you're going to, you know, how are we going to wrap up her storyline in a good way where it does it justice? Because you don't want her, like I said, being like 65 years old trying to, you know, play Ahsoka Tano.
Well, and again, and this brings up something, it's very similar to the comic book problem that they're having over at Marvel, DC Cinematic Universe, same thing, is that you have these timeless characters who they, over the last 50, 60, 70 years, have been creating all these new stories. And you could do that in the form of books or comics or animated series, right? You can do that. You can have these perpetual adventures with these characters. You don't even have to age them really at that point. But when you start bringing things into live action, that's where you run into an issue. And this is the first time that Star Wars is actually running into this, because now that they're doing this whole live action television series thing, you bring up Ahsoka. They're going to want to, I mean, sure, Rosario Dawson is eventually going to be too old to play that character. So what are they going to do? Are they going to retire that character? Doubtful. What they're probably going to do is recast. But if you get an actor, an actress who is just so identified with that character, it's kind of like the Han Solo problem. Look at what happened when they wanted to do a younger version of Han Solo. Everybody's like, it's not Harrison Ford. You know, so when you get actors who are really identified with their particular characters, it's way more difficult to try the recasting option.
Yeah, and then especially if the character has like different variations. See, and that's the thing too. It's like, you know, with Han Solo, there's only one variation of Han Solo. I mean, sure, we got like a younger version of him, but I mean, more or less the character.
But in the books, it's different though.
Well, what I'm saying is more like, okay, and what I mean is on the extreme side. So, like, take for example Jack Nicholson. Okay, everybody here like, okay, that's the Joker. No one else can play Joker better than Jack Nicholson. He is the Joker. And then along comes Heath Ledger, who plays the Joker, but he plays a different version of the Joker. He plays him as the anarchist. And then you have, you know, what is his name?
Jared Leto.
Jared Leto. Yeah, Jared Leto. He played another version of the Joker. The psychopath, and then you got Joaquin Phoenix who played him in a different version. So, but they played different versions of that one particular character because that character had different sides where you could do that. Somebody like Han Solo, like I said, you really only can play Han in one way.
Mm-hmm. Well, here's the other thing too. You have to remember that when you're talking about, these are characters that were actually born in a comic book. So they weren't necessarily attached to an actor. When Han Solo was created, he wasn't in a book form or whatever. It was Harrison Ford's portrayal of him that actually created him. Now, and here it comes. Here comes the Star Trek reference, everybody. And it's early enough in the show. So it is kind of amazing that I'm making it this early in the show. But this is perfect because you look at the character of Captain Kirk. And he's been played. Obviously, William Shatner was the one who pretty much defined him. Yeah. But when you look at Chris Pine's characterization of him, it's good. I mean, it's acceptable and everybody can get on board with it. Now, it's true they're basically explaining that, well, it's a prime versus this alternate universe or whatever. And so they're trying to use that to get around it. But it can be done. I just think it just depends on how iconic the character is. You could say the same thing with Leonard Nimoy's characterization of Spock. And then, of course, you had, oh, man, his name. It was just there, and it just disappeared. But the guy that played him with Chris Pine. Oh, Zachary Quinto.
Oh.
That's who it was.
Yeah.
But now you had this new guy who started playing him in Star Trek Discovery, who is continuing the thing in Strange New Worlds, and now it's like, okay, yeah, I'm on board with this. So it's interesting how you can have these iconic characters that are equally so, but it just depends on, I think, the character itself, and then I guess the public's attachment to them, because a lot of people have a hard time envisioning anybody other than Harrison Ford as Han Solo.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, and that brings us, like I said, back to this with Cassian Andor, Diego Luna playing this particular character, he's already, in a substantial age right now, and he's still trying to play a younger version of himself. Andor takes place theoretically 5 years before the events of Rogue One.
Well, and the other thing, too, I believe, before I make this point, I got to put this, David Sumler Jr., it's not a party without a Star Trek reference. Well, at least it isn't one of our shows without a Star Trek reference. Let's put it that way. I mean, I think it's weird if we don't make one.
Right.
But I think that pretty much what they were originally planning on doing was making each season like a year in his life or something like that.
Yeah, so they plan on making a year in his life, and what's cool is they kind of decided to break up it by episodes, or episode arcs. So we're going to get the first 3 episodes the first day it premieres. So there's going to be 3 episodes that we're going to get, and that's going to continue. That's going to make one story, and then the next 3 is another story, and so on and so forth. And that's how they decided to do it. So instead of they're basically jumping a year. So that's why it's been cut down. Instead of 5 seasons of it, they decided to make it 2. But with 12 episodes per season, you're almost kind of.
Yeah, well, to that, so his quote, Tony Gilroy's quote, is basically this. This is a big chunk too,
Well, while you read that, I got to step away for just a moment, but go ahead.
Yeah, all right. So basically, he's saying, yeah, it was about last spring. We were in Scotland, San Wallenberg, Diego. We were like, how do we get out of here? How are we going to get out? What's our exit strategy? And I think that what they're saying here is, how are we going to actually be able to leave the show? Because again, this is one of those things that I point out constantly. And that is, you have to, I think, in a way, really try to figure out how are you going to get out of a show? This is something that I really wish more creators would do, whether it's film, whether it's television. Another reference that we always make all the time is Cobra Kai. Cobra Kai is about to go into its 5th season. They already have an idea for the 6th season, and they want it to keep going. But ever since season 1, those writers actually had an ending in mind. They had a story arc. They knew pretty much the beginning, middle, and end. They just didn't necessarily know how they were going to get there. And I think that that's one of the strengths when you write from that perspective versus we're just going to, which is more traditional, by the way, we're just going to keep getting all these stories and we'll just keep writing and writing different episodes. And then all of a sudden the network says, you know what, we're going to cancel you this year. Or they just get tired of it or whatever. For whatever reason, they decide this is going to be the last season. And I think that that's one of the things that is super intelligent. And that is know how you're going to get out. Know when the end is going to be. One of the things that I do like about at least what they're attempting to do with Star Wars now, with the Book of Boba Fett, they said it was going to be a one and done, limited series. They lied. Now they're doing season 2. With Obi-Wan, it's like, yep, one and done. And now they're flirting with season 2. But with Andor, I think we're finally going to get, look, it's going to be 2 seasons and that's it. And that's why I was saying that I think when, and I use Cobra Kai as an example, you got to have that beginning, middle, and end in mind and just know when you're going to get out. Now, you can keep it flexible because in the case of Cobra Kai, they're like, look, we basically know the story. We know what we want to do with these characters. We just don't know how many seasons we're going to take to get there. If the networks say, hey, guys, this is going to be your last season, they said, look, we can wrap it up in that season. But they're taking their time. So, he realizes, he goes, okay, we have 4 years and we have 4 blocks. And I went home and I came back and came up with, you know what? Why don't we jump a year? And this goes into what you were talking about, Daryl, where they were talking about they were just going to jump a year. And what's really cool, when we came back for part 2, we're going to jump a year and we're going to come back. It's a year later. All this stuff's happened, and we're going to come back for a Friday, Saturday, and a Sunday, and then we're going to jump a year. Then we're going to do like 5, 6, 7 days and jump a year. And then we're going to do 2 weeks and jump a year. And the final block that we come back to is going to be the last 5 days before Rogue One. That's another thing that I like. They are defining where this thing is going to end, and they're also defining where it's going to end in context of, in this case, the movie that the series is serving as a prequel, which is Rogue One.
Yeah, I mean, that was one of the things I really enjoyed. And honestly, that's one of the things I really enjoyed about Rogue One, to be honest with you, is because it led up right before right after the opening credits of A New Hope. I mean, it pretty much butts up right against that.
Yeah,
so
that's
there's
so
no
cool.
time loss. And so you really kind of get this whole story that's told in 2 different movies. And with Andor, we're now seeing like, okay, we're seeing this journey of this guy who was once a separatist. He's now decided to go to the rebellion, or he decided to join up with the rebellion. This is all this political stuff going on. And now it's going to lead up basically before 5 days before the event of Rogue One takes place. And we know, like, and that's the thing, is like, I was telling someone today about this character, because they hadn't seen Rogue One, but they didn't care about the spoilers, but doesn't make it out of Rogue One. And so like these characters have a very definitive end, especially Andor. We know that. So it's like, because otherwise you would have to explain, okay, well, if that's the case, if he survived, why wasn't he in the original trilogy? You know what I mean? So so that's why I really love just the planning. And this is what I mean. They're actually taking time to plan. These are things that we like to see and hear about. It's them actually taking time, figuring out, like you said, Eric, all right, where this is going, how are we going to get there, and this is the end result of it.
Yeah, and I mean, and he basically goes on to say, I'm not going to read the exact quotes. I'll paraphrase here. But he basically goes on to say, look, you know, this thing is going to end. The final scene is basically going to be Andor walking across the tarmac, getting ready to meet that rebel spy or whatever he ends up killing in Rogue One, right? Spoiler alert, I guess. For those of you who still haven't seen Rogue One, first of all, shame on you. You shouldn't even be, but I'm not going to go there because everybody, not going to be part of the toxic fan base here. But I'm just saying you've had some time. It's been on Disney Plus. But still there, yeah. So I think it's really cool that they're defining even what the last scene is going to be. You know, that they're going far enough about this to go, look, this is something that I think is really going to have a positive impact on the series as a whole. Because when you know what you're working toward, when you know what your ending is going to be, when you have it plotted to this degree, I mean, you heard all the reading that I did where it's kind of like, okay, well, this happens, you know, there's this 3-episode block, and then we jump 2 weeks, and then this happens, and maybe we jump another year or something like that. So they're really laser focused, pardon the pun, on what they're doing here. Let me get this comment from David in. He says, because we know he's going to die, do you think it'll take away from the series having stakes? It's hard to create suspense when you know he's going to survive the series. In a way, yes. Because there's a couple of ways that they can create suspense. Number one, quite frankly, they'll just create a bunch of characters that we don't know if they're going to live or die. I mean, Andor we know, but that doesn't mean everybody else in there we know. So that's the first way, that I would answer that. Second way is you could still create suspense with Andor because it's one of those things where, and this even happened in the Obi-Wan series to a degree, it's like, look, you know he's going to survive, but you don't know how he's going to survive that particular situation that he's in. And sometimes that can make it more fun because you sit there and you're just like, man, how's he going to get out of this? I mean, this situation looks fairly hopeless, but yet I know he survives, and that alone could add a little bit of tension of, well, how's he going to get out of this? So there are those couple of ways that they can still create some tension, some stakes. Also, a mission that might succeed or fail. Sure, we know that Andor eventually survives. We know the rebellion carries on, obviously, even to episode 4, 5, and 6. But even in the Clone Wars, even in some of these other shows, they very definitely had stakes. And it's like, ooh, because they could end up losing whatever battle or whatever it is that could actually create a lot of difficulties and setbacks for them. Or, you know, maybe there's a critical ally or something. I don't know. Something that could have turned the war around that they end up losing. You know, that sort of thing. So I wouldn't say there's no real chance for stakes, but I do take your point in the sense of, look, it's not like we're fearing for this guy's life. You know, we know he's going to get out of this. Yeah. Rogue One, on the other hand, well,
not so much.
Yeah, that's where his proverbial luck kind of runs out.
Yeah, I mean, I completely echo what you said. I mean, you know, we only know that, I can tell you this for a fact. We know 2 people are going to make it out. For sure. I mean, well, at least out of Andor, we know 2 people are going to make it out. Now, everybody else, fair game. You know, it's like the Hunger Games at this point. But, but you know, that's what makes it interesting. And like you said, you know, a lot of times it's the stakes or things that are involved or decisions that have to be made. You know, do I choose the love of my life or do I choose my mission? You know, those are vicarious situations that a lot of times our heroes are placed in, and you know, you really don't know how you're going, like you said, how they're going to get out of it or what they're going to choose, or is a choice going to be made for them, or you know, now they have to kind of regroup and everything like that. So there's a lot of things that, like you said, that could cause those stakes to still be there, even though we do know that he's going to survive.
Yeah, I mean, even the trailer, I was sort of, getting certain chills and just somewhat on the edge of my seat, even just watching the trailer to the thing. Because, and I said this on, I think it was like our last show or the one before, where I was just like, you know what, this thing feels more like a movie to me. This actually probably feels more like a theatrical Star Wars release to me than any of the other shows.
Well, yeah, it's funny that you kind of bring that up, and this is, I don't know if you covered this while I stepped away for a second, but Tony Gilroy, he really wasn't interested in making a movie about, as he called it, space wizards.
Right.
He wasn't, and he's not interested in making movies like that. He's more wants character development. He really wants to get into the psyche, the lives of everyday people to explain a lot how things are done. And Diego Luna even said this, that there's no Jedi in this. So now you're just dealing with the bare bones of like, okay, what does society look like under this imperial rule? And how is this affecting everyday people? And what are those everyday people doing or not doing to deal with this? And that's a very real, grounded story, because it's something that most people can relate to. Because, whether we watch things on the news, whether we saw, things like, we saw in Ukraine or wherever in the world, you see real people are dealing with these situations, and how are they surviving? What are their thoughts on it? Do they agree? Do they disagree? Those who chose to fight back, what was their plan? What were their thoughts on that? And, this is what we're really going to get in Andor. And you're going to see I believe we're going to see a lot of different, shifts in power, as far as like people who we thought were our leaders, or people who we thought that are going to be the hero. Maybe they decide not to because the stakes are too high. These are things that, like I said, everybody can kind of relate to. So I think that's what's going to really appeal to a lot of folks when this drops.
Yeah, because I mean, you have to look at it from this standpoint too, is the fact that one of the things that we've always wanted, and a lot of fans wanted too, is to actually have a movie that takes place in the Star Wars universe, but isn't maybe so Star Warsy as people would use as a criticism. I mean, I happen to like it when it's Star Warsy, right? But
right.
I understand what people are saying, though. It's like, why can't you just have a regular movie that takes place in the Star Wars universe, but maybe deals with some of... And you're still dealing with some of the themes that are in Star Wars, and that classical Star Wars, the hero's journey, good versus evil, the light versus dark. I mean, a lot of the different overall themes that you get in a typical Star Wars film, you could still have that, but now you're moving to the more practical side of it. You're moving towards, instead of the macro, you're moving down to the micro. Instead of this vast galaxy-wide story where you're only focusing on a handful of the higher-up characters. And no, because you even brought up on the last show, we were talking about it, and it's like, look, I remember it was one of the people that wrote in the comments. And I remember your answer about it, was like, well, the Jedi and the Sith, they're kind of everywhere and stuff. But it's like you said, nobody knows that. I mean, nobody knows that the Emperor is a Sith Lord. They think that he's just Emperor Palpatine, got injured by a bunch of Jedi. Nobody knew Vader was a Sith Lord, really. I mean, they kind of did maybe, but I mean, very few people really had a lot of contact with him. Luke Skywalker, they didn't know he was training to be a Jedi. In fact, most people knew him as the one that blew up the Death Star. He was the hero of the rebellion. So
yeah, he was a farm boy.
Yeah. By and large, most people didn't even know that the Jedi and the Sith were actually pulling the strings. So from that standpoint, now you're focusing down on the details, the microcosm, I guess. where you're dealing with all these different planets and just everyday people.
Mm-hmm.
And Obi-Wan kind of focused on that. You know, I got that feeling when he was working just as kind of like a space butcher. And they were showing that it was almost like a Groundhog Day scene, you know? It's just like they kept showing his ride to work, him doing his job, you know, him going home. It was very mundane.
Mm-hmm.
And it goes to show that, you know, life isn't exciting like that anymore. It's not a bunch of battles and, you know, all this outward
heroic.
Heroic and everything, and these outward uses of the Force. You know, now it's very much like I'm going to work, I'm chopping up this, you know, whatever. Maybe it's bantha meat, I don't know. And then he basically goes home, feeds his little pet, kind of, I don't know, reads, relaxes, tries to talk to Qui-Gon, and does the same thing the next day. And now you're seeing all these people in different walks of life and how it's affecting them and how they're disaffected by the whole thing. And it's also probably going to be a program that shows you, hey, this is how the rebellion actually formed. It was a bunch of people that were really sick of their situation.
Yeah, I mean, definitely. And then what I hope to see is things on the Imperial side as well. You know, we don't often talk about that, but from the Imperial side, like, okay, how are they viewing things? Because you got to look at it. They're the presiding government. So a lot of those people are loyal to the Empire. They think that what they're doing is right and noble and just, and really they're just oppressing people.
Exactly.
And so now they're looking at these people who are throwing seeds of the rebellion as like, okay, you know, we got Saw Gerrera and we got all these, you know, radicals out here who are just, you know, crazy, you know, and we need to stop them because they're trying to destroy what we're trying to build here, because they're in under the mindset of this is a good thing. And so, like I said, the ideologies of both camps and both parties, watching them battle it out, you know, we saw some things where they're going to be in the Senate room. We saw things as with Mon Mothma, you know, debating and arguing stuff. Those closed doors meetings where you have different senators trying to figure out, like, okay, you know, what are we doing? How do we stop this? How do we block that? You know, this. How do we get people to side with us, even though they're scared? You know, there's a lot of different things that are, you know, going to be going on in this show. And that's what makes it interesting.
Well, I'll tell you exactly one of the things that has always fascinated me. This actually started in the Claudia Gray book, Lost Stars, when they humanized the Empire a little bit. I think that was the first instance where, hey, you're seeing everything from not, you know, Vader and the Grand Moffs and all these people, but I mean, like the normal people that are just working there that think, hey, I'm working for the government. I got a government job. I mean, everybody forgets that the Empire was once the Republic. And to a lot of people, you know, sure, they go, yeah, you know what? There's a little bit more rules than there used to be. You know, and things are, I mean, you know, the uniforms have gotten a little less colorful, a little bit more monochrome, but by and large, they still think that this is a legitimate government that's doing good and trying to bring order and peace to the galaxy. And that's why what fascinates me is how they sell the whole idea of the rebels as terrorists. Yeah. These are terrorists and they have to be stopped. And what's funny about that is if you actually watch all this stuff and you keep that mindset in mind, it could totally look like that. You know, you could spin that. You could spin that as propaganda. You could, you know.
Yeah, and once again, it's what side are you on? You know, and that's what makes it interesting. It's no different than, you know, what we experienced today. You know, you got Democrat versus Republican. You have, you know, people who trust the government, people who think the government is corrupt. You know, you have all these different, you know, everybody has a side.
Well, here's the thing that's interesting.
Are in the middle.
Well, what I find interesting about Star Wars in particular is the fact that, yes, it's true. It depends on what side you're on. But the reason why we're on the side of the rebellion is because that's the side we're presented. You know, we're presented with that side being skewed more towards the good. Now, of course, obviously, we know, you know, I mean, we see the evil that Palpatine and all these guys are doing. But what's funny is the only reason why, you know, we don't understand half the time, like, well, why don't these people see that? I mean, because if you really look at in-universe what these people are seeing and what their perspective is when it comes to this stuff, they don't know. What else would they see? Of course they would see the rebels as terrorists. They don't see what we see. You know, they don't see it in a, you know, as like a movie or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, it's no different than, you know, the armchair quarterbacks. You know, they always talk about, where they're like, oh, why didn't he throw the ball there? Why did he, you know, make that type of, you know, pass?
Oh,
it's
man,
like,
my dad's like that.
Totally
like that.
You have the advantage. You get to see the field from a completely objective standpoint. You don't have 6'5", 300-pound linemen barreling down.
That's exactly what I tell him too. I said, Dad, I said, look, you have like 16 camera angles and replays and guys like drawing on the field and, you know, I mean, and then you got these commentators that are basically telling you. I was like, trust me, if they had the feed in their ears and they were hearing and they could see all this, like they had virtual glasses or something, you know, it's like, maybe it's a little different. But I was like, I promise you, when you're on that football field, it looks a little different to you. Just saying.
Definitely. Yeah, the stakes are different. Yeah, and that's how we're made to feel in this show, is that, you know, no different than, that's almost like I said, if we were, as, you know, those of us who are living in the Americas, you know, howdy to everyone else who are joining us from afar, but those of us who live in these United States, like, that's almost like if, and Dave is gonna love this, but that's just almost like if Joe Biden was like Palpatine, and, you know, you had like, you know, and it's like, okay, he comes out, he's like, yep, I'm gonna forgive student loans, everybody's gonna be cool, you know, we're doing this for the people. And then, you know, after the press conference, he goes back to the White House, puts on his little hood, and then, you know, now he's like this evil, you know, manipulative.
I will make it legal, dude. There was a Saturday Night Live skit back in the '80s when Phil Hartman used to play Ronald Reagan. And it was so, because, you know, Ronald Reagan kind of had that same reputation at times, so he's kind of like a doddering old man or whatever. And it was exactly what you're talking about. He's coming in inviting like some Girl Scout to take a picture, like, yeah, okay, well, you know, whatever. She leaves or whatever, and then all of a sudden, like, this whole map comes out. He goes, okay, now here's what we're gonna do, and he just like, he's planning this whole like world domination. It was one of the funniest skits ever. And that's basically what it's kind of like. And that's actually what Palpatine did. I mean,
exactly. Like, that's exactly it. And that's what I'm saying. Like, but being a regular normal citizen, like, we're not privy to what's going on necessarily in the White House, like that in that detail.
Yeah,
you know,
we don't know
what the news shows us, pretty much, right? So that's what this is going to be like. It's really just like, and that's why I say it's so grounded. It's a really grounded show, and that's why I feel like a lot of people are going to be able to get into this type of Star Wars, because if you're not into the whole, you know, Force and lightsabers and, you know, doing all that type of stuff, but you're really into great storytelling and understanding characters and, you know, falling in love and dealing with the ills of the world, just set in the Star Wars universe, well, there you go.
Yeah, I mean, this show might actually be for you. I mean, it reminds me of one of my favorite scenes that illustrates that whole Palpatine thing is, of course, the whole beginning of Episode 3, Revenge of the Sith, where he's got to pretend to be, you know, an Obi-Wan, Anakin rescue him, and, you know, he's just like, oh, you know, like acting all, you know, kind of weak or whatever, and timid and kind of freaked out, and... You know, it's so funny, you know, Obi-Wan's like, well, Sith Lords are a speciality or whatever. And I'm sure Palpatine's like, really, Obi-Wan? Come on, dude. You know?
Like,
I so badly, I just wanted to slice you in half right now. But, you know, you got to give it to him. He doesn't break character. And all through the Clone Wars series, it was the same thing. I remember when they did that Godzilla-inspired episode.
Yeah.
Where they had that giant creature that hated Palpatine, basically, kept going after him. And it's like, Palpatine had to keep acting like, he
was helpless.
Yeah, like he was helpless and all this stuff. And there was a couple of times where, the thing almost had an upper hand, and you're sitting there thinking, like, okay, at what point, in order to preserve his own life, does he go, all right, I gotta, like, show a little bit of Sith Lord power here, because I can't count on these guys to save me. And that's the other thing, too. I mean, if you think of, in a way, it's like this really weird, whacked, forced humility that he had to have, because he had to let the Jedi save him. These people that he thought he's vastly superior to, and just like...
He vehemently hates it.
Yeah, he had this massive contempt for him. I mean, and that's why I think it was so cool when Ian McDiarmid at the end... I thought he perfectly encapsulated just that intense glee that he had, that he didn't have to pretend anymore. He can finally be like, man, I hated you people. I want to,
Yeah. I've waited a long time for
exactly.
this.
Like, you know what, Yoda? I don't have to be cool to you anymore. Now I can try and, throw you across the room or something and start chucking Senate pods at you or whatever. And that had to be such an amazing release for him. And I think that when you start to now view the Andor show, when you view all this stuff in context, I think you're going to see a little bit of, like you said, this is how the Empire views itself. They are the heroes of their story. And
that's how it is in life. Most people feel like, I always say, like, you're always the villain in someone else's story. And that's exactly how it is. It goes both ways.
Okay, so David says, does the story demand that the greatest of all time be in the show? Meaning, obviously, Palpatine.
Palpatine.
Yeah, we've learned now. I no longer say, who's he talking about? Yeah, I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, David's totally an acolyte.
Yeah. But no, it doesn't. And that's the beauty of it. Because, look, it's kind of like most political thrillers and stuff, or, war movies and stuff, don't necessarily feature the president. The president may be mentioned, either as the president or sometimes by name. Sometimes not at all. And so you could actually frame this entire season, because, first of all, it's focused on Andor. And one of the things that I think that they're going to really delve into is the fact that he used to be a separatist. And this is something that you and I pointed out a while ago when they first started talking about this, is that Andor, both times, was fighting against the legitimate government. Except the first time he was doing so in error, because it was pretty much a big facade, right? I mean, Palpatine was playing both sides. So he was a separatist fighting against the Republic. Now he's a rebel fighting against the Empire. Well, the Empire is the Republic. It's just a Republic reborn and into a different system. So, that said, let's put it this way. It's really more focused on Andor and his struggles and the people around him. I'm sure it's going to focus on Saw Gerrera quite a bit. I would be surprised if you don't hear a reference to the Emperor, especially when Mon Mothma and all these people are talking. They might say, well, the Emperor's doing this or the Emperor's doing that. I could see a reference, but he absolutely does not need to make an appearance in it. I mean, if you think about it, he would have more to do in Obi-Wan than in Andor. And he only appeared at the very end of Obi-Wan. Like the second to last scene or something. So, that's proof that you don't need to, again, and there is that temptation to shoehorn some of these characters in because they're fan favorites, and it would kind of work, and, it would get more viewers initially, maybe. But sometimes that does more harm than good.
Do you think that we're going to... Now, here's a question.
Uh-oh. All right, you gotta make me think. It's like, come on, man. We went on later tonight, you know. Now I got to think.
Well, because see,
Coke,
the thing is, it's like, okay, I don't expect to see Palpatine or Vader. However,
no.
I do expect, and I wonder how they're going to do this, to see Tarkin.
You expect to see Tarkin?
Yeah.
Why?
Well, just because, I mean, he's kind of like the leader of the military.
Kind of, but not necessarily. You got Grand Admirals, you got other Moffs, he's like the Grand Moff, or at least one of them.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, you could see, what about Admiral Mahdi or something, or, you know.
Yeah,
these
I mean,
guys.
you got Ozzel and all the rest of them.
Yeah, you don't necessarily need to, because remember, there's a lot of these outposts and, you know, little factions or whatever. I mean, even from the trailer, it didn't look like they were necessarily going after anything super huge. Because remember, at this time, especially right now, Tarkin's overseeing the whole Death Star project.
Yeah, true. But I think, like, there's still a lot, but he's still involved with a lot of the political things that are kind of going on.
Yeah. Oh, no doubt. But I don't.
And so that's what I'm saying, like, especially I could see him and Mon Mothma going at it a little bit.
Well, I think you're assuming because Mon Mothma's in it that the counterpart would be in it. But I think it's really more about the birth, because remember, the rebellion doesn't really truly birth itself until toward the end of Rogue One. In fact, the Battle of Scarif, that's kind of like the undisputed true birth of the rebellion, as we know it anyway, moving forward from there. So I think that you could still focus on some of these other things without necessarily having to bring in, like, I don't know if the story really involves people that high up or the story that high up. I mean, I'm not saying it couldn't, I'm just saying I don't think it does.
I think it would be cool though, but I mean, like I said, I think the only problem with that is that now you have to find someone to play Tarkin, or unless you do the whole
yeah, like the de-aging,
the de-aging,
you know, and
type thing.
They're probably better at it now than they were, you know, at that original attempt. Anyway, or just get some YouTube kid to do it.
All right.
But I mean, the thing is, they could do it, but again, I don't necessarily think. Now, if it had stayed at a 5-season arc, then maybe. And even as a 2-season arc, I think that maybe as it gets closer to Rogue One, perhaps you'll start to see it. But even then, they were completely surprised. Because remember, don't forget Tarkin's appearance in Rogue One. It was basically, now he's building the Death Star in earnest. You know, he's kind of going after Krennic with it and everything. Whereas the Rebellion wasn't even trying to they didn't get the Death Star plans until they found out about it. Remember, they didn't even find out about the Death Star until halfway through the film. You know, they just happened to play that recording of, oh man, Galen Erso. And it was just like, whoa. And then, if you remember too, on top of that, they didn't even believe it. They thought she was an agent of the Empire trying to sow discontent or confusion or whatever. They didn't even think a weapon existed, and then you had half of them go, well, but if it does exist, we got to do something about it. You know, that whole thing. Which I find hilarious. So, I don't know if they would necessarily have a reason to bring Tarkin into it, because it almost seems like if you're going to do that, that's why they brought him into it for Rogue One, because of the whole Death Star connection.
You got a point.
But you never know, though, because, and again, I'm going to borrow one of your lines, it really depends on what story they're going to tell.
True.
Because we really don't know that. I mean, we see what we saw in the trailer, but, you know, we don't know exactly where they're going to go with this whole thing. It'll be interesting, though. I mean, I will say this. I think it's going to be probably, if not content-wise, I definitely think from a production standpoint, it's going to be the best of the Star Wars Disney Plus shows so far.
Oh yeah.
Just because there's something else that Gilroy, I think, actually brought up in this article where he's like, look, we didn't want to do the volume or any of that. We wanted to go to real sets. We wanted to... I mean, it just looks like from that trailer that there was actual money spent on this show. Like, this had almost definitely a movie budget, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, and I think that just adds to the... the lore of, well, I won't say the lore of the war, but it's kind of like it adds to the war aspect of it.
Mm-hmm.
Because it has to, you have to feel like a war is going on. And
well, the other thing,
like you really, and like I said, with the show already being grounded, I think you really need to. It's important that you ground, like you're literally grounded, like you're really on real ground doing stuff, because it feels more real and authentic.
No, that's a good point. I mean, if you're gonna basically say, look, we're not going after the whole lore part, like you were saying, the Jedi, the Sith, all the more fantasy elements, and we're gonna make this a little bit more realistic, a little bit more grounded. It's kind of like a regular war movie that just takes place in the Star Wars universe kind of thing. Well, then, yeah. Not to mention the fact that if you're gonna butt this up against Rogue One, you're going to have to make it feel similar. You don't want that last episode to feel too TV, and then you go into this big budget movie. So, yeah, we'll just have to see. But, of course, it's not about us. It's about you guys. So, let us know what you think in the comments section. You still have maybe 20 seconds to leave us a comment in the chat section live. Want to thank anybody everybody actually, that chatted in live and has been watching live. We really appreciate you guys. If you like what you saw, make sure you hit that like button, because we all know, look, every YouTuber says this. It pretty much helps us. It helps the channel. Excuse me. It basically, the YouTube algorithm likes it, so... hit that like button. Plus, it lets us know that you like what we're doing. And then in the comment section, let us know what you think about this whole thing going from 5 seasons to 2 seasons. Do you think Andor should have stayed 5 seasons? Do you think it should have been maybe 1 season? Let us know what you guys are thinking and what you're looking most forward to about this show. And then, of course, we're on every Monday and Friday at 8. Usually. Tonight notwithstanding. I mean, sometimes, though, the schedule, like I said, we're not full-time YouTubers, and we need to get more support, obviously, before we can actually turn this into any kind of a full-time gig. So you just bear with us. We'll either go on live later, or we'll do a pre-recorded show in its place. Monday show, we really don't know what we're talking about yet, do we?
Not yet.
Yeah, see. I always say that, too. Although there have been times where it's like, nope, we actually know what we're talking about. But this time, we don't know, so you guys are going to want to watch us Monday night at 8. A week from tonight. Probably, in fact, a week from tonight and maybe on Labor Day. I don't know. Maybe we won't even do a show for Labor Day. This is a holiday. I'll be working. So it might not be practical, but we'll definitely try to pre-record a show for you guys for next Friday. And then we should be live again the following Friday. So make sure you keep watching, check with everything, subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell. You guys will always know when we're live, or you'll know when we post new content. So until Monday, hopefully we see you guys at 8. With that, I'm Eric Vansel.
I'm Daryl Sanders.
May the Force be with you.
Always.
Head to Head, a Star Wars podcast. Be sure to follow us on Twitter @HeadToHeadSW. Submit your questions for our next show. Visit our official website at headtoheadswpodcast.com. Until next time, may the Force be with you, always.